Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking a truly fascinating paradox. We live in a world that constantly tells us our happiness is tied to, well, traditional capitalist metrics, right? Your salary, your job title, or the size of your bank account. But what happens when someone completely throws that entire rulebook out the window? Today we're looking at the teachings and writings originating from Life Shan Yuan founder, the guide Xie Feng. His life story presents this radical philosophy where ultimate joy isn't found in accumulating wealth, but literally in giving it all away through selfless dedication. It's a striking concept for sure, and we're going to trace exactly how he arrived at this philosophy through some intensely grueling life experiences.
Okay, let's dive into this. Zero. Yep, zero. That is the exact amount of money Xu Feng earned over 8 incredibly demanding years of labor. Think about that for just a second. 8 years of waking up early, working yourself to the absolute bone, and having zero financial return to show for it at the very end. I mean, for most of us, that sounds like a total nightmare, right? Or just a massive failure. But for Xu Feng, this number represents something entirely different.
He writes, "For 8 years I labored tirelessly without earning a penny, yet those years were the happiest of my life." Now this is the sharp contrast that really hooks this entire narrative. It's a total inversion of how we usually think about work and reward. He experienced profound physical and financial loss, yet he describes an emotional and spiritual payoff that completely eclipsed anything money could buy. To understand how he reached this mindset, we really have to look at where this whole journey began.
Part 1. Surviving the Zimbabwe Jungle.
So our timeline actually starts in Africa. From 1994 to 1995, Xu Feng found himself in Zimbabwe, traveling incessantly within a 600-kilometer stretch between Bulawayo and Victoria Falls, right in the raw, untamed jungle. He was moving from village to village, school to school, day and night, basically laying the groundwork for what would become a deeply transformative period in his life. Now, on paper, his official job was simply to serve as an interpreter for a well drilling team. But in reality, he was doing pretty much everything. He was a buyer purchasing materials, a scout finding the drilling sites, a manager handling relationships and figuring out accommodations. He even organized local villagers to build roads and supervise the workers. There were no weekends, zero holidays. He worked relentlessly for at least 10 hours every single day, often not getting back to his temporary quarters until midnight, just to collapse into bed and do the whole shebang all over again the next morning.
And during just those 2 years, get this, he traveled a staggering 250,000 kilometers across this rugged African landscape. That is an almost incomprehensible distance to cover in such a short amount of time, especially when you consider the conditions he was operating under. He was constantly in motion, acting as the vital link keeping this entire drilling operation running across these vast distances.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer absurdity of the vehicle he had to use to cover all that distance. It is absolutely wild. Because they were short on vehicles, he was assigned this open-top Jeep that was literally falling apart. It needed to be jump-started by other vehicles every single day, and once you finally got it running, he didn't dare turn off the engine during the day or he'd just be stranded. The driveshaft would frequently just detach itself, it had no working headlights at night, and perhaps the most terrifying quirk of all, the steering wheel had this severe lag. He would actually have to turn the wheel half a full rotation before the tires even responded, which often resulted in a sudden, sharp jerk of the vehicle.
Imagine driving that broken-down Jeep in conditions like this. One night at around 10 p.m., he had to lead a convoy through a roadless jungle just to relocate their camp. But remember, his Jeep had absolutely no headlights. So the only way he could see was by having a large truck drive right behind him to illuminate the path forward. And because he was the only guy who actually knew the route, he had to be in front. He drove that entire night purely by intuition. Miraculously, he navigated them safely to their destination. The local workers were actually so amazed they joked that he should be their president's driver. But an even more harrowing experience happened during an emergency drive. He had to navigate over 60 kilometers along the national highway from Bulawayo to Victoria Falls in complete pitch-black darkness. With absolutely no lights, his only method of navigating was looking up and tracing the faint visual contrast between the dark treetops and the slightly lighter night sky. In his writings, he notes that while he felt no fear at the time, looking back, he realizes he was absolutely gambling with his life. But as he puts it, life often compels us into these extreme situations, driven by forces completely beyond our control.
So, for these 2 grueling, literally life-threatening years, he was supposed to earn 60,000 yuan. But here is the wild twist. Because he ultimately defied organizational arrangements and chose to stay abroad, he never received that money. And he never even asked for it. He just walked away from all the financial compensation for all that extreme hardship.
Part 2, Finding Joy in Hardship.
This brings us to a really profound turning point in our explainer. How does someone endure this level of physical exhaustion, literally risk their life, forfeit their pay, and still look back on this as the happiest time of their life? Well, we're going to break down his spiritual development and look at exactly how he found pure joy inside of severe hardship. In his writings, Zhu Feng outlines these 5 joys that he experienced during this time. First, there was the sheer thrill of navigating diverse, rugged roads, dirt, mud, jungle paths, which gave him this daily sense of novelty and excitement. Second, the deep camaraderie and joking around with an American and a Zimbabwean engineer, finding real humor across cultures. Third, and I think this is just a beautiful image, he witnessed pure elation. Whenever a well finally struck water, the entire village, men, women, children, would dance around the well in pure joy. Fourth, the collective laughter and bonding with a dozen Chinese workers, eating, sleeping, and laboring together. And finally, the 5th joy, he felt his own character elevating. By dedicating himself to the selfless dream of bringing happiness to poor, kind-hearted people, his own spirit just soared.
Let's move to and see how this builds into Part 3, Creating the Life Shan Yuan Values. So, transitioning from immense physical labor in Africa to immense intellectual and spiritual labor starting around 2002, he created the core values and foundational texts of Life Shan Yuan. Now, the metrics of his sacrifice versus his reward here are striking. On the input side, he dedicated 6 years of his life. He wrote over 1,000 articles, totaling nearly 2 million words. Financially, the input was staggering. He completely closed down his business to focus on this, incurring an economic loss of at least 1 million yuan. But look at the output side. Financial return? 0 pennies earned. But the spiritual reward? He created a spiritual home and gained dozens of soulmates. He quotes the old saying, "To have one confidant in life is rare." Yet, through his immense personal sacrifice, he felt he had gained dozens of true confidants, brothers and sisters with whom he could literally share life and death. For Zhu Feng, this level of connection represents an immeasurable wealth that completely nullifies his economic poverty. This deep connection is directly tied to a really key concept in his teachings, the 1,000-year world of heaven. Now, this isn't some place after death, it's actually a state of being. It is a profound emotional, spiritual, and soul freedom that is achieved right here, right now, by gathering together with like-minded brothers and sisters. His selfless giving was the direct pathway to unlocking this state of blissful community.
So, the crucial point is, Part 4, Spiritual Wealth over Material Poverty.
And this brilliantly illustrates how Zhu Feng's philosophy completely redefines what it actually means to be wealthy. It places a far higher premium on the soul than on the wallet. On one hand, you have absolute material poverty, giving up a 1 million yuan business, working 8 years for 0 pay, but on the other hand, you have total spiritual and soul enrichment. He doesn't view his financial loss as a tragedy at all. He actually considers his resulting spiritual enrichment to be a direct blessing from the greatest creator. The hardship was simply the required currency to purchase true, lasting happiness. And he doesn't believe this is just a personal victory either. He writes extensively about the Life Shan Yuan era. He firmly believes that if this specific spirit, finding true happiness in the selfless process of labor and giving, were to spread like wildfire, it would usher in a blissful future for all of humanity. It's a powerful vision, where collective, selfless dedication completely replaces individualistic material pursuit. Which leaves us with this final, really important thought to ponder. We spend the vast majority of our lives working, striving, and laboring. But if, as Zhu Feng's life suggests, true, indestructible joy and a spiritual home are created solely through selfless dedication, we have to ask ourselves, what exactly are you laboring for? Are you building a bank account, or are you building your soul? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this leaves you with something profound to reflect on today.